Want to make a difference in your community but not sure how? Go to GoFundMe.com right now and start a GoFundMe. Seriously. Your next fundraiser doesn't have to start in a school parking lot or a church basement. You can start a GoFundMe today in just minutes. Fundraise for yourself, a friend or family member, or an organization. All that matters is that you care about them. GoFundMe is the trusted place to fundraise for what you care about. With no pressure to hit your fundraising goal, but tons of tools to help you reach it, you can confidently start fundraising right now. Whether it's creative, local, or critical, your cause matters. And there's a reason why GoFundMe is backed by millions and chosen by fundraisers everywhere. It works, and it matters. GoFundMe helps you make a real difference. Start your GoFundMe today at GoFundMe.com. That's GoFundMe.com. GoFundMe.com. This is a commercial message brought to you by GoFundMe.
The firehouse was quiet. Outside, the sky was clear. No moon, no breeze, just stars hanging low over the pine trees. It was only 68 degrees out, which sounds nice for summer, especially in Florida. But despite the drop in temperature, it was one of those nights where the humidity made it feel much warmer than it actually was. Dew clung to the windshields, porch lights glowed with soft halos, and the air hung so still, even the wind was holding its breath. Inside the Malabar Volunteer Fire Station, 32-year-old Brandy Hall was finishing up her shift. She'd checked the inventory, made her usual call home to pray with the kids before bed, and spoke with her husband, who, by morning, would be standing in front of a judge to be sentenced on felony drug charges. She wasn't feeling well, and honestly, with everything she had going on, it's hard not to imagine why. Just after 10 p.m., Brandy climbed into her green Dodge pickup and drove off into the dark. She was never seen again. The next afternoon, a fisherman would spot her firefighter gear, all floating in a nearby retention pond, a pond known to local firefighters, located just across the street from the fire training academy and not far from her home. Her truck was pulled from the water and her blood was smeared inside of the cab, but Brandy was nowhere to be found. Now, almost 20 years have passed and there's still no new information. No body, no arrests, and no answers in sight. In the years that followed, Brandy's case would spark headlines, raise suspicions, and leave her family desperate for answers. Was it retaliation for her husband's crimes? A love triangle turned deadly? Or something even harder to explain? This is Sequestered Season 2, Case 2, The Disappearance of Brandy Hall, Part 1. In 2006, Brandy Hall was living in Malabar, Florida. Located in Brevard County, Malabar is a small, tight-knit community tucked along the Indian River Lagoon. It's part of Florida's Space Coast, a region known for NASA launches, pine woods, and the kind of low, marshy terrain that stretches all the way to the river. It's the kind of place where people know their neighbors, and where gossip travels fast. Brandy was a familiar face in town. She was tough, quick-witted, and always had grease under her fingernails, whether from a chainsaw, a boat engine, or from the trucks at the firehouse. She was the kind of woman who could jumpstart your car, fix your fence, and still show up on time for the night shift. Brandy started her firefighting career in Holapa, Florida, volunteering at just 20 years old. That's where she met Jeff Hall, the man who would become her future husband. Jeff was calm, confident, and the kind of guy who'd been in the game longer than her, but never talked down to her. They got married in 1994. Over the next decade, their careers grew side by side. Jeff climbed the ranks and eventually became the fire chief of Osceola County. Brandy was rising too, working her way up at the Palm Bay Fire Department. She had sharp instincts, a cool head, and a reputation for staying calm when everything around her wasn't. By the year 2000, she was promoted to driver engineer, which is a big deal, especially in a department where most of the leadership roles went to men. She didn't stop there. She went on to become a certified paramedic, too. Brandy wasn't just good at her job, she was made for it. Helping people wasn't something she learned, it was just who she was. Jeff and Brandy had 2 kids, Taylor and Clay. In 2006, Taylor was 10, and Clay was just 5 years old. By all accounts, Brandy was an attentive, present mom, always checking in when she could, even if it meant calling from the back of an ambulance or between emergency calls. Her mom, Debbie, often helped with childcare, but Brandy never let work become an excuse. She always found a way to be with them. At 32, her life was full. Maybe a little overwhelming at times, but it was hers. Even after budget cuts ended her paid position, she kept showing up at the Malabar Fire Department, volunteering, and helping out wherever she could. Brandy was known to her coworkers as Fire Mom, not because she was the oldest, but because she looked out for everyone. She just had that innate sense, and those who were in her care felt it. She was just on it. She trained the new recruits, double-checked the gear, and kept the trucks running smooth. She was the one who noticed when something was off. She was also the one who brought coffee when the shift dragged on too long. And when the siren went off, Brandy was always the first one suited up and out the door. She wasn't just strong, she was born with grit. Her mom said she was fearless from the time she could walk. In an article from the Palm Bayer, her mother Debbie said Brandy was a tomboy from a young age who could fix anything, ride horses with fearless abandon, and navigate an airboat through the Florida swamps. When she was 11, Brandy survived a serious ATV crash, breaking part of her skull and jaw. The accident left her with visible scars and chronic migraines, but it didn't slow her down. If anything, it fueled her drive. She fished, hunted, tinkered. If something broke, Brandy didn't fumble. She got to work. From the outside, her life looked steady, built on hard work, community, and family. But under the surface, cracks were starting to show. Her marriage to Jeff had grown tense. Stress at home, stress at work, and Brandy started growing close, maybe too close, to a Palm Bay fire captain, Randall Richmond. They'd worked together over the years and trusted each other, and somewhere along the way, the lines got blurred. Then, in July of 2005, everything came crashing down. Brandy's husband, Jeff, was arrested for running a sophisticated marijuana growing operation out of a mobile home on a piece of land that he and Brandy owned in rural Osceola County. These weren't just a few plants tucked in the backyard. According to an article from firehouse.com, deputies uncovered 460 marijuana plants, along with 18 pounds of processed cannabis, inside of a fully outfitted grow operation that included high-intensity lights, hydroponics, sprinkler timers, and even a $23,000 generator that was running it all. Authorities estimated the haul was worth roughly $1 million, thanks in large part to a potent strain nicknamed Crippy. According to the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, Jeff Hall and his growing partner were earning about $15,000 a month from their operation. Jeff admitted to profiting from it, but denied selling the drugs. He was charged with trafficking, manufacturing, and possession with intent to distribute. And because the property was jointly owned, Brandy was arrested too. She told investigators she had no idea what was happening there, and most of the serious charges against her were dropped, but one stuck: commercial littering and pollution, a felony. Her trial date was set for October 2006. The fallout was immediate. Brandy's spotless record didn't matter. Palm Bay Fire let her go. And in a town that valued loyalty but whispered behind closed doors, Brandy went from respected to controversial overnight. Friends became distant. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. But she didn't stop. Brandy picked up construction work with a friend's crew. She went back to volunteering, and she kept her certifications active because under Florida law, if she stayed out of service for too long, she'd lose her firefighting license. And that wasn't just paperwork. That was her whole identity, her purpose in life. For Brandy, being a first responder wasn't just a job. It was the one place where everything made sense. And no matter what had happened, no matter how far her life had unraveled, she wasn't going to let that part of herself disappear. Then came August 17th, 2006, a Thursday. It was a hot, quiet night in Malabar, the kind of night where the humidity doesn't let up, even after dark. Everything felt still, heavy. Brandy was working an overnight shift at the Malabar Volunteer Fire Department, which wasn't unusual. She often took those late shifts, especially since she was doing everything she could to stay close to the work she loved. Jeff was set to be sentenced the next morning for his role in the marijuana grow operation. It had been just over a year since his arrest. A year of court dates, media attention, and the slow unraveling of the life they'd built together. Brandy had made the decision to testify on his behalf as a character witness in his trial. So tonight the plan was simple. She'd finish her shift, head home to be with the kids when they woke up, and they'd all go to court together in the morning. She'd get through it and move forward, just like she always did. Their kids, Taylor and Clay, were at home with Jeff that evening. According to the Charlie Project, they watched TV and fell asleep together. I'm sure Jeff was doing his best to keep things as normal as possible for them. I mean, just imagine that evening. Taylor was 10, Clay was only 5. They probably had some sense of what was shifting, but how do you explain to kids that their dad's going to prison? That life as they know it was about to split wide open? And Jeff knew. He knew exactly what was coming. He understood what his choices had cost and what the court's decision would mean for his family. Everyone was doing their best to prepare for the next day, but none of them could have prepared for what was really about to happen. Around 9:30 that evening, Brandy picked up the phone at the fire station. She called home like she always did, prayed with the kids before bedtime, checked in on how things were going. She told Jeff she'd see him in the morning, and she told her coworkers the same. What surprised some people was that Brandy had also asked both her current fire supervisor and her former boss, Captain Randall Richmond, to testify for Jeff the next day. Yeah, that Randall. The same man she'd once been romantically involved with. It says a lot about Brandy, really, that she was still willing to show up for Jeff, even with everything going on behind the scenes, even with the affair, even with the weight of what that courtroom must have represented for her. She still planned to take the stand, still planned to bring the kids, still planned to speak on his behalf. At around 10:30 p.m. that night, Jeff got word that the court had bumped up his hearing time. Now, instead of a mid-morning appearance, he'd need to be there at 8 a.m. He left a message for his attorney, then tried to call Brandy. She didn't answer. Her voicemail was full, and Jeff had no way of knowing, at least not yet, that he'd already spoken to his wife for the last time. Back at the firehouse, Brandy wasn't acting strange, but something felt off. She told a fellow firefighter she wasn't feeling well. Maybe it was a headache. Maybe it was one of those migraines she'd been dealing with since she was a kid. It wasn't anything dramatic, nothing that raised alarm. She finished the inventory she'd been working on, packed up her things, and walked out of the station, stepping into the thick Florida night. It was about 10:45 p.m. when she got behind the wheel of her green Dodge pickup and drove off. Here's what we know. At exactly 11:06 p.m., Roughly 20 minutes after leaving the station, Brandy answered a call. It was from Randall Richmond. The call lasted 10 minutes and 46 seconds. And when it ended, so did the trail. That was the last known contact Brandy Hall ever had with anyone. The next morning, things started unraveling fast. First, Brandy never came home. She didn't show up at the courthouse. No texts, no calls, no quick excuse about traffic or needing more time. No Brandy. It was still early. Jeff was already in custody, his mind racing as his hearing approached. He kept calling her over and over, but there was nothing. He was expecting her to walk into that courtroom with their kids, to take the stand, to speak on his behalf. And instead, he got a very different phone call. It was Randall, and he was crying. He told Jeff he couldn't make it to court that morning. Didn't say why, just that he couldn't make it. Jeff cut him off, asking the only question that really mattered. Where is Brandy? Randall didn't answer. He just hung up the phone. Jeff's hearing came and went. No Brandy, no kids in the gallery. No one stood to testify on his behalf like they had planned. And later that day, he was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Jeff was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, stunned and unsure of what had happened. Had his wife gotten lost? Was she hurt? Had she changed her mind? Deep down, he must have known, like many of us do in hindsight, when something feels wrong, it usually is. That night, August 17th, 2006, marked the beginning of one of Central Florida's most disturbing and most confounding missing persons cases. Because Brandy didn't just disappear. She was erased. And we're only just getting started. Here's Brandy's mother, Debbie, sharing what she remembers about the night Brandy went missing.
It wasn't like her not to be where she was supposed to be in the first place. And we just couldn't figure out where she was at. And it's like it was just so strange.
It was just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, August 18th, when a local fisherman made his way down a rough dirt path near a quiet retention pond in Palm Bay. It was hot, Florida hot. The temperature hovered around 87 degrees, and the humidity made sure your clothes stuck to your skin. The air was thick with the smell of sun-baked weeds and stagnant water. Clouds drifted low overhead, dense, gray, and slow-moving, and a light breeze pushed in from the east, just enough to ripple the pond's surface and stir the tall grass along the edge. This wasn't a well-marked spot. It wasn't a park. There were no signs or benches. It was the kind of place you only knew about if someone had shown you. Quiet, off the grid, used mostly by locals for fishing or for other things. As the man approached the water, something caught his eye. At first, maybe it looked like trash, gear someone had dumped. But the longer he stared, the more unsettling it became. There were boots, heavy firefighter boots, a pair of bunker pants, a coat, and a helmet all floating together, bobbing lightly in the murky brown water. Near the edge of the pond, he noticed a small ice cooler, half submerged in the mud, but still upright. According to the Charlie Project, when officers opened it later, the beer and sodas inside were still cool to the touch. Something wasn't right, and the man knew it. The fire training academy sat just across the street, but this didn't feel like gear left behind from a drill. The man fished out the gear and took it straight to the local fire station, reporting everything he saw. Within hours, law enforcement had swarmed the scene. When officers took a closer look, they realized this wasn't just discarded equipment. It all belonged to Brandy Hall. It was the first clear sign that something was very wrong. And not long after, local authorities found her truck submerged in the pond. The search for Brandy Hall had officially begun. According to Florida Today, the pond where Brandy's truck was found was an L-shaped retention pond tucked behind Eastern Florida State College's Palm Bay campus. I mentioned this before, but the pond wasn't visible from the road. It's the kind of place you would only notice if you were really looking for it. In the days immediately following Brandy's disappearance, investigators partially drained the pond and brought in divers to search, but the conditions were rough. The water was dark, murky, and still. Visibility was next to nothing. Divers could barely see their own hands in front of their faces, let alone anything deeper. They focused their efforts on just one section of the pond, and whether it was due to time, staffing, or sheer difficulty, the rest went largely unsearched. Years later, when the pond was fully drained for the first time in over a decade, reporters were given a rare look behind the scenes. What they found was staggering. Without water, the pond looked enormous, more like a deep, sunken field than a retention basin. In some places, it dropped over 20 feet deep, with steep, uneven slopes and a thick layer of muck coating the bottom. It was the kind of place where you could hide something, maybe even someone, and it could stay hidden for a long time. Brandy's truck was finally pulled from the water, and what followed was a full-scale search, first by law enforcement, then by the wider community. In the first 48 hours, deputies returned to the pond. They scanned the shoreline, they dredged and dragged, they used sonar, divers, and poles. As days passed, the perimeter widened. Swamps, canals, ditches, remote patches of overgrown land. Deputies trudged through standing water and brush. Volunteers walked roadside culverts with flashlights and paper flyers. At one point, investigators even reached out to psychics, not because they expected results, but because they were running out of options. They were desperate, and so was Brandy's family. Her friends and loved ones raised reward money. They went on TV, they gave interviews. They knocked on doors and held vigils. They made noise in every way they could, begging for any lead, any tip, any small piece of the puzzle that might point to where she'd gone. But there was nothing. No movement, no trace, just an echoing silence that seemed to grow louder with every passing week. Then, almost a year later, on June 24th, 2007, two fishermen were casting lines in a canal near Vero Beach. That's more than 60 miles south of where Brandy had last been seen. They spotted something floating near the shoreline. It was a backpack, and it belonged to Brandy Hall. Inside were her clothes, her wallet, and her day planner, but no other sign of Brandy. No blood, no note, no explanation. Just a bag that had somehow traveled miles from where she vanished and surfaced without her. Here's News 13, David Wanders breaking the news of finding the new evidence in June of 2007, just 10 months after Brandy went missing.
A bag belonging to Brandy Hall was found by fishermen in Indian River County earlier this week. The bag was underwater.
It contained some personal items. They had found some specific item that had her name on it, and I guess they went home and Googled the name and realized what was going on and contacted the Indian River County Sheriff's Office.
At least it was something to be brought out back in public light, saying this case continues and it's strong. Then the Palm Bay Police Department, FDLE, is working on the case, and hopefully that would trigger something in somebody's brain to call in and say, listen, hey, I know this, I know that.
Police wouldn't get into specifics about what was in the bag, but it adds even more weight behind the theory that someone could have murdered the firefighter. Hall hasn't been seen since she went missing in August of last year, since her last shift here at the Malabar Volunteer Fire Department. Her fire gear and truck were found in a pond near the Malabar fire station. Police say her blood, a substantial amount of her blood, was found in the truck. This pond does not connect to the body of water in Indian River County, where her bag was found earlier this week.
Another full year passed, and in 2008, a second item turned up, this time near Mathers Bridge in Indian Harbor Beach. It was a yellow fire helmet used during Brandy's time as a volunteer in Hullapaw. Her name was still printed across the front, along with the words, "No fear." The helmet had traveled more than 30 miles from where her truck had been found. But again, no Brandy. So now, 2 personal items have been discovered miles apart over the course of 2 whole years. And still, there is no body, no witnesses, and no trace of what happened that night. It was as if she'd been swallowed by the landscape itself. By 2008, the trail was ice cold. The searches had quieted, the flyers had faded, and every new tip felt more like a whisper than a breakthrough. Still, Brandy's family held out hope. There was nothing that could explain how a decorated firefighter, a mother of 2, a woman known for her courage and grit, could just vanish without a trace. Next week, we dig deeper into the people who knew Brandy best. The husband with something to lose, the fire captain with something to hide, and the stories they told when no one else was left to speak. Was it revenge, jealousy, or something even darker? And we'll ask the question that still lingers almost 20 years later. If Brandy Hall didn't walk away, then who took her? If you have any information about the disappearance of Florida firefighter Brandy Hall, please contact the Palm Bay Police Department at 321-952-3539 or call Crime Line anonymously at 1-800-423-TIPS. Because Brandy's story isn't over. Not yet.